Yeah, Sheikh. Or we may even dip into that as the time goes on. See, Buhaira, I told you he was hard on his workers. You feel it already. SubhanAllah, Sheikh. Allah Akbar. Tayyib, Bismillah. If there are any questions here, we'll try to take them now. And if not, we take some from online. Bidnillahi ta'ala. If there are questions from the sisters, they can send them up via text message to their husband or son, or write them down, however the master wants them to do so. And if the questions from the brothers, then we'll go from there. Bidnillah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I put the paper under the door.
Understood. Right. So the first question is, with regards to Al-Kutub As-Sitta, why Malik included in Al-Kutub As-Sitta? Very good question. And there are many great people who came before you who asked the same question and brought up the same problem. And there's several answers. One answer is, as I explained to you, Kutub As-Sitta was based off of generation. And Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala was not from the generation of those six. He lived, he died, his peak, his authorship was in the 2nd century. Understood? So Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrates from Malik with one intermediary. Imam Muslim narrates from Malik with at least one intermediary. So Imam Malik's generation is before that of Bukhari, Muslim, etc., etc. But from Bukhari to Nasa'i, they generally I said, there are exceptions. There are very short chains of narration. Imam al-Bukhari has 3 narrators between him and the Prophet. Not him and the companion, between him and the Prophet. Ibn Majah has several hadiths, even though they're weak, between him and the Prophet. The average isnad in Kutub As-Sitta, 4 narrators, sometimes 5, and that's still short. Nasa'i sometimes has 6, has longer chains. But Imam Malik is hop, skip, jump there because of his time. That's first and foremost. Secondly is Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, many scholars have included his book in Kutub As-Sitta. And they've excluded that of Ibn Majah. Thirdly, a third reason is that Imam Malik's book rahimahullah ta'ala, and this there's a counter argument to this, is that it wasn't 100% purely a book of hadith. Where the Imam Malik's book had a lot of fiqh in it, different fatwas, different opinions of the tabi'een, sahaba, and Imam Malik's book had many balaghat, many hadiths in which Imam Malik says, balaghani, it reached me. And the in-betweens were not mentioned. Whereas the other Kutub As-Sitta, 9 out of 10 times, they're saying, reported to me, told me directly. Alright, so these are some of the reasons why Imam Malik's book was not considered to be in Kutub As-Sitta. But FYI, Al-Kutub As-Sitta is not a holy term. It is not a Quranic term. It's not a prophetic term. It's not something which has to be. It's a terminology or term that the scholars came up with and it became popular. Secondly is, the scholars of Islam, they do not agree on Al-Kutub As-Sitta 100%. Some say Muwatta's Malik's Muwatta, and some say Sunan ad-Darimi instead of or in place of Ibn Majah. Alright, and others may even say with regards to Nasa'i, whereas Nasa'i did not die in the 3rd century, but he died in the beginning of the 4th century. Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala's book is included in the Kutub As-Sitta because of chronology, he died early on. And secondly, Ibn Majah rahimahullah ta'ala, he had a very beautiful style of organizing his book. And number 3, his surplus hadiths, his zawa'id. And we've explained all of this, you can find it on the channel in detail. If you have an appetite for Kutub As-Sitta and the hadith demographics. Wallahu a'lam. Fadl akhi.
What would you suggest is the starting point for somebody that wants to start seeking knowledge?
Starting point?
Yeah.
Inshallah, I would say 40 Hadith on Seeking Knowledge, Volume 1. and then volume 2. Inshallah ta'ala. Both of the books are available, explained. You can find both of them. They're written for someone just like you, trying to seek knowledge, trying to learn and study, coming from the West. And also, since you asked, what just came out, The Way of the Disciple. In my humble opinion, I'm not saying it's just because it's my book. Wallahi, I'm not. Honestly. But I would say it's a must read for anyone who's aspiring to seek ilm, speaking English, English culture, English language, trying to go overseas and study and learn. The Way of the Disciple, a must read on how and why, when to seek knowledge. Wallahu alam.
How do you advise a person that doesn't speak Arabic to benefit from the Kutub Sittah? And which book do you recommend?
واضح.
Being that
سؤال مهم جدا وتطبيقي. A very important practical question. And I would say, first and foremost is, if you don't speak Arabic, you have to clear up a few misconceptions. Very important. Extremely important. And speaking Arabic isn't exclusive to a layman. There's some people who may have some type of knowledge. They may be leaders of communities and they don't, what? Speak or read Arabic. That's a reality. Imam of a masjid, leader of a whole group of masjids who doesn't speak a lick of Arabic. Not making this up. Nor can they read Arabic. As scary and crazy as that may sound, it's a what? It's reality. So the first misconception that we have to clear up is that you cannot get knowledge, you can't become studious, you can't be studious unless you know Arabic. And the big red marker, and let's cross that out. That's not true. It's misconception number one. Misconception number two, which is just as dangerous on the other side, is that I can become a scholar. And I can be mujtahid. I can be an independent interpreter of Quran and Sunnah, leader of community, without that level. That's a major, major dangerous misconception. So you can study, you can learn about things without knowing the original language. I can learn about Christianity while speaking Latin. It's a fact. I can learn about Japanese culture and all of its aspects without speaking and reading Japanese. That's a fact. There's a ton of information available in English, but I can't reach the core. I can't reach the pinnacle. I can't have a thorough, solid, polished understanding of Japan and Japanese culture and Japanese people unless I what? No doubt about it. Even if I can't speak it, I can at least what? Read it. And rather, you're still handicapped. Because if you go to Japan, everybody doesn't speak English and people who don't want to speak English. And they won't give you access to certain libraries and artifacts unless you show respect to their culture. They're going to ask you, do you speak Japanese? No, he has an interpreter. Get this guy out of here. You get the point? He's not serious about learning about us. He didn't even take the time to what? Even if it was a basic stupid phrase. How you doing? I'm from America. You want a Big Mac, a hamburger? A joke. This is reality. You know how to say hi in Russian when you're doing business with Russians. That's going to what? No, that's the deal. He knows how to say my name is such and such. Let alone I don't know any Russian. And you want to do business with us? You couldn't learn how to say hello, how to say my name is? Yeah, get out of here. So that's a major misconception. Many people, unfortunately, they have this misconception. I can be this great, great erudite scholar without knowing Arabic and reading Arabic. No. Your studies, your knowledge of Quran and Hadith without Arabic will be at best limited and handicapped. And you will always be at the mercy of a translator. Always. So once we get those two conceptions out the way, then we can move forward. And we can say is that there's no harm, but instead there's benefit and there's gain. And any Muslim who doesn't speak or read Arabic, opening up the books of Hadith and reading about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life. You don't have to be a scholar to read about his life. You don't have to be a scholar or a student of knowledge to understand basic things. This is how the Prophet did it. The Prophet was kind. You don't have to be a scholar to understand that. You don't have to be a scholar to understand that Islam promotes courage and bravery. I read myself in Bukhari, the Prophet was the fiercest warrior. The Prophet was this. You don't need Arabic or no further person to teach you the basic things. And you can learn more than that as well. So what I would advise, number one, is to be in the classes and the lectures with regards to the books of Hadith. Number two is to read the summarized works. Bulugh al-Maram, Riyadh al-Salihin, of course, Nawawi's 40. Mishkat Masabih is extremely important book of hadith. Bread and butter, Mishkat Masabih. Many people, they overlook that book in English. Bread and butter, that's a staple book in any Muslim home, in any Muslim's life, right? And then from time to time, to get a deeper taste, more appreciation of true flavor, you're going to actually go back to the original Bukhari and read it for half an hour a day, 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. Make that your life accomplishment. Who can say that in my 30 years of Islam, my 40 years of Islam, my 60 years, my 70 years of Islam, I read Bukhari from volume 1 to volume 9 in English? You get the point I'm trying to make? That's a major life accomplishment. Imagine how satisfying that feels. I read the entire Bukhari, right? Let alone from time to time throughout the week, you just pick up a random volume. You have your systematic studies on the side, and then you need some unsystematic studies as well. And I've said this before. So, as a layman Muslim, every single day, I read the English translation of Bukhari for 15 minutes, starting from beginning to end, until I'm done. Once I'm done, I start again or move on to the next book. Number 2, I listen to the lectures that are available on Bulugh al-Maram, which is a condensed book that took from the bigger books. And number 3, on a daily basis, I put on a blindfold and I just pick up my first volume that my hands touch. Volume 3, Ibn Majah, read it. Volume 2, Muwatta, read it. Volume 7, Bukhari, read it. You need some random reading, a part of the formal reading. Everyone understand this? Everything can't be formal, systematic, A to Z. You need some sporadic stuff too. Try it out, inshallah ta'ala. Wadah? Alhamdulillah, barakallah feek. Question says, can a Muslim male, female inherit his non-Muslim parents' property? Muslim makes a will to include non-Muslim children, halal or not? Very important question. And the general answer is no. Is that a Muslim is not to inherit, give or take from a non-Muslim. And from the things that prohibit inheritance is ikhtilaf ad-din, difference of faith. All right? So that's the general answer. Exceptions to the rules, differences of opinion here and there, but that's the general answer. So therefore, what do? Your grandma who raised you, who took care of you, kind, sweet woman. She had everything she needed except for Iman, unfortunately. So akhlaq, generosity was on. It was all there, but she just was never a Muslim. And you are her favorite grandson, or her only grandson. And she has houses, property, things that she wants you to have. What do? When she dies, you can't get anything. The money will go to waste. It will go to a bunch of people who are ungrateful, that will want to squander it, sell it, destroy the heirlooms. What do? There are some ways around this problem, and there are some ways that you cannot get around this problem. From the ways that you can possibly get around this problem, possibly, as I've stated before, is to make a difference between a will and inheritance. The will has different rulings and dynamics than the inheritance. The inheritance is far more rigid and stringent. You can't do this and that. The will is more open of who you can and cannot give property to. So for argument's sake, hypothetically speaking, you explain this to your grandma in general. Look, make sure you put me in this will and it's not split up and divided, so on and so forth. Now, let's get deeper than that. In the United States, is there an Islamic distribution of inheritance? So for real, there's no rules. Lawless. Your grandma dies, the money is left behind. Somebody has to take the money, right? There's no Sharia dividing half, fourth. There's no person getting the sixth and the eighth. There's none of that. It's the lawyer. You get the point I'm trying to make? So, Allahu Alam, in this instance, the less of the two evil is to take the inheritance instead of that money just being squandered. Now we have to understand the Islamic legal system in theory versus practice. Anybody understand this? The theory is it being incorrect. But in practice, situation, what are you going to do with the money? The family is saying you have to take the house. The family is there upset at you. Everybody knows grandma loved you. And you have a family. Take the house. I can't because it's haram. Based off of what is a haram? There's no legal system in place. You guys get the point I'm trying to make? And the same applies to other types of money as well. In theory, it would be haram for you to take that money. But in practice, you may have to take that money and do something with it, instead of the money just being wasted and squandered. You get the point I'm trying to make? In an Islamic court, you get the point? There's no theory in practice. The Islamic court, it's haram for you to take the money. It's done. United States, wallahu a'lam. As far as children that are non-Muslim, that has been answered, and halal in Islam, in Islamic Sharia, if the child or concubinage, then the child is haram. It's the only two times or places in which a man can have legal sex with a woman. Girlfriend, sweetheart, this and that, none of that is included. She's my wife, she's my right-hand possession. The children that come from my wife, they are attributed to me, legally. The children that comes from my right-hand possession, that I'm the only one sleeping with, right? I take care of her, I provide her. She is my slave. She is protected by me. She has a child, my child. And see some of the differences in different types of slavery and culture. There is no, the child is just in the middle somewhere, half light skin, half dark skin. This person sleeps with the slave and lies. None of that in Islam. Everyone understand this? If you have a child outside of one of those two areas, then the child is illegitimate. And if the child is illegitimate, then there are no rulings pertaining to that. But once again, we're living in America, in which you have a problem. Single parent homes. We have a problem with women playing the mother and the father, unfortunately. It's a big, huge problem. Getting locked up, judge sending you for 40 years out of your life for a small offense, 10 years out of your life. Your life is messed up. And that is looking for your love and for your guidance and for your care. And you just say, I can't because you're not my son. Everyone understand the point I'm trying to get to? There's practice. And giving sadaqah to anybody is a virtuous deed, let alone a person that's actually your son. But Islamically, this person marrying this one being uncovered in front of this one inheriting from that one, that's off limits. The laws belong to Allah. You get the point I'm trying to make? If you have a son, you can't just ignore and abandon and neglect your son, saying that he's a child of zina, so therefore leave him to the system in the streets. Doesn't work like that, especially in our what? Situations in which so many of us had to suffer from that. Your father when you were growing up. So we have to break that system. Wallahu alam.
What if the child or lad, if they spin off the deen and they stop practicing, can they inherit it from the Muslim family? They were born Muslim, but they got older, they said they don't want to practice anymore.
If they come back, goes back to the previous answer, Sheikh. Allah musta'an. Oh yeah. And there are many, many big problems, right, in our communities that we have to deal with. In theory and in practice. The work is cut out for all of us, starting with myself. It's a lot of things that we have to fix. And it may be too late for us. That's a sad reality. But my son should have better. I want my grandson to have what? To have better. I want him to start the race with a head start. Not like me, I had to go to jail to learn about Islam. I had to learn Arabic when I was 20 instead of my young son learning. Whack that. May Allah help us all. Is there an age limit for animal sacrifice for newborns? If you did not do the aqiqah for the child, then you should do the aqiqah for the child. Even if the child is older later on. And some scholars hold the view is that the aqiqah is mandatory. And that it is a debt upon the father's neck. Period. Wallahu hadith on shaving the newborn and giving its hair or its weight in gold and silver. There lies no doubt shaving the head of the baby is from the Prophet's sunnah. Hands down. Giving the weight of the hair in gold and silver is from the practice of some of the Salaf Salih. And it is not the Prophet's practice. Can you do it? Should you do it or not? Is a different what? Discussion. But that is not traced back to the Rasul. There's a difference between the two. Shaving of the head, no doubt about that. Giving its weight in sadaqah of the silver and gold, that's what? يختلف. Wallahu a'lam. Now, may Allah bless you.
I have two questions. The first one, you mentioned in the beginning about Muslims being the exception, and that it shouldn't be the exception. All Muslims should be this way. So what do you do if you work in a scenario where the non-Muslim tries to make you the exception? Oh, mashallah, I know from other Muslims that they got boyfriend girls, but you don't.
Understood.
What is the reply?
Clear. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And the reality is the reality. Unfortunately, there are 20 Muslims who work at this job. You're the only one who pray. For real, you are. So you have to accept that. But it's not supposed to be that way with regards to breaking and smashing stereotypes. You get what I'm trying to say? Is the first shot was a lucky shot, right? It was a fluke. You just land, but he lands 2, 3, 4 more punches in a row. Obviously, you can't just say, you get the point I'm trying to make? But for argument's sake, if you're the exception at work, then you have to, what can you do? I gotta pray. But he doesn't pray, Abdullah doesn't pray, Fulana, this one doesn't pray, sister, hey, look, I'm not responsible for them, nor am I speaking ill of them. I'm not telling I'm a better Muslim, I'm holier than thou, but right now on this break, I gotta what? Gotta pray. Bottom line. And maybe that's a means of dawah, and the sad reality is, you'll receive more jealousy and hatred from Muslims than the non-Muslims in the workplace. Who do you think you are? You think you're better than us because you dress like this? Or you think you a good Muslim and I'm a bad? I ain't saying nothing, bro. I ain't saying nothing to you or about you, but I'm just what? I'm praying. You smoke your cigarette? You take up your insecurities with yourself. So you can't care about the blame of the what? Of the blamers. Wallahu a'lam.
The second question was, you mentioned about dawah movements. You talked about that before. Is there a good book or a source to read about that? Because the non-Muslims, there are all kinds of books about us and our movements, whether it's Salafi or each of them.
Understood. It's a yes and a no answer. And what I mean by that is just because a non-Muslim writes a book on a dawah movement, it doesn't mean it's a bad book. Rather, sometimes, and Allah knows best, not all the times, some of the best books you'll find are written by opponents. Or someone who isn't an opponent, but they're not in it themselves. And one of the reasons why this is sometimes a good book is because they have no bias to it. But a Muslim writing about 99% of the times is going to have some biasness. He's going to support this movement, Jamaat Tabligh, or the Dawah, or Dawah Salafiyya, or War of Deen, or Nation of Islam, or whatever, or whatever, or whatever. Very seldom you're going to find someone that's a transparent, impartial researcher. Now, my job is to document the Muslims of America. Bosnian, etc., etc. This was their call. This was their movement. And most people who write about it, especially within it, they want to be biased. You understand? All right. So just because it's a non-Muslim who writes the book doesn't mean that it's automatically what? A bad book. Principle number one. Principle number two is that there are sources for the different dawah movements in America that aren't found in books. It can be articles online, encyclopedias, in person or online, let alone with regard to my advice, if you want to get a thorough, in-depth understanding, is to take everything that's available and read all of it. Read everything. What the non-Muslim said about it, what the Muslim said about it, read about the nation, pre, during, after, read about all of it, and there lies no doubt you'll have a thorough understanding of the ins and outs of movements, their rise, their falls, their pros and their cons, strengths and weaknesses. Of course, there are different titles, but I won't give them to you right now on the live stream. Wallahu alam. Wa alayhi salam to Allah.
The Sunnah of Dawood is considered by a lot of people to be like a fiqh, a collection of fiqh for the deen. But what makes it different than the rest of the other sections?
Understood. With regards to the main feature, and obviously that's the main feature of Sunnah Abu Dawud. There are many main features that he has, but that's the main feature, is that it serves Islamic jurisprudence, the fiqh. And that it is one of the main sources of fiqh. What makes that different? What sets it apart from the other books or sets the other books apart from it? Number one is thoroughness. The most important, most authentic, most famous, the most is there in one place, in abundance. Number two is how Imam Abu Dawud put it together. Easy and simple. Versus other books that have the same hadiths and similar, but it may be more technicalities involved. More subtleties involved versus clarity and simplicity. Clarity and simplicity along with overwhelming abundance. You have enough, it's spilling out. These are some of the things that makes Abu Dawud's book so what? Sets it apart from the other books. And if that's not the case, then most of the hadiths you'll find Ibn Majah, you find Tirmidhi, you find Bukhari, etc. Last but not least is that those other books, they have other main features. So in general, Imam al-Bukhari's main feature, there are many features of Bukhari. But if you had to pick one, the most beautiful thing about Bukhari is the strength and the authenticity. If you had to pick one feature from Imam Muslim's book, and there are many features, you would pick what? It's how he organized and put the hadiths together in one place, in perfect order. Abu Dawud, clear. Tirmidhi, there are many features of Tirmidhi, but if you had to pick one, then it will be what? It will be the madhahib of the ulama. How he mentions the different views of the ulama from the Sahaba up to his time in the book. Ibn Majah has the additional hadiths. An-Nasai, comprehensive and exhaustive. So every book has its main feature, even though there are things that are going to be shared and paralleled through all six. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab. Is there a what? Connection? What's the first word you mentioned? Dilbani. Dilbandi? Dil. I don't know of a connection between the two. In general, I would say, wallahu alam, is there is a lot. In most cases, people that are called or call themselves Dilbandi don't get along well, hate, curse people who are called or call themselves or associated with Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab. Is there a connection that is indirect? For sure. Just look at parallels. The core of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab's message, the core of other messages. Just make a parallel with regards to Christianity, Catholicism versus Protestantism. It's a difference, right? One of the main core values. Saints, miracles, intermediaries between you and the scripture cannot be interpreted except through the clergy, right or wrong. Versus other movements, whether it's the Protestant movement, or reform of this one or that one, Martin Luther is based off of the exact opposite, which is what? Every Christian has to have his own relationship with no one in between. He has to interpret the words of God himself. You get the point I'm trying to make? So you see, one is connected to the other even if they are outwardly disconnected. But for real, one is a... You get the point I'm trying to make? So that's what I would say, in brief. with regards to the different movements in Islam, the different aqidas in Islam, versus the movement and the call and the reformations of Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab. May Allah have mercy on his soul. Wallahu a'lam. Naam akhi. Wa salam to Allah.
So we touched on, when we talked about will and inheritance, right? So where do beneficiaries fall in between?
A beneficiary with regards to will and inheritance, testament, estate, etc. A beneficiary could be an heir. It could be a word game. This person is a beneficiary of my estate. And at the same time, that person is also my son. So oftentimes it's wordplay, let alone the wordplay with regards to will and testament, estate. None of those words are the Islamic Quranic words. So they could be give or take. You dig what I'm trying to say? Somebody could say will and testament, and what they mean by that is everything. And in Islam, that would include inheritance and will. You get the point I'm trying to make? So to make it clear, wallahu alam, and to simplify things, the will, number one. Let's make a few parallels. With regards to before or after death. The will takes place when? Before death. Inheritance takes place after death. Strict rules, for argument's sake, pertain to the what? The will or the inheritance? More. And the inheritance less than the will. Who you like, who you don't like, who you want to be your beneficiary, who's close to you, pertains to the will. Versus the inheritance that has to be cut up and split up according to the Quran, regardless of how other people feel. You get the point I'm trying to make? So let's make an example of this. A man has a wife, right? Opposed to? Correct? And he also has a long-standing affair. More. She's beyond a girlfriend. They've been having this affair for 30 years. He loves her to death. Equally, if not, what? Well, how can that? It's not. This man has a lot of money and property. You don't think he's going to put her? But Islamically, according to inheritance, she's not supposed to get what? A dime. You get the point I'm trying to make? So there are parallels, and then there are things in which it's night and day. Will and inheritance. I would advise you, we have a full lecture series on this one topic. You can go to our website, HadithDiscipleshop.com, and you can find, I think it's 3 parts. Intensive course on the will and the testament and inheritance in Islam, and answering some of those practical hardliner questions. And Allah. Khair inshallah. Fadal akhi.
So you talked about if you had a child out of wedlock or a child from zina, what if you married the mother of that child?
Clear. If you married the mother of the child, after the child was born and conceived, the child is illegitimate.
Well, before.
Why? Real room. Some scholars hold the view is that if the man marries the woman while she's pregnant, and that there's no fighting over who's the legitimate father, he can be the father. The problem comes, it becomes difficult after birth, and it becomes difficult if there are other men saying, no, that's my child in the womb. So it's you and your girlfriend, you guys trust each other, love each other, etc. I love you, I will never cheat on you. That's not the same as 3-4 men getting an envelope. You are the father. And it's a word of a difference between the two. You get it? Especially if a son is born or the son grows up. He's 18 years old now and he got drafted at the NBA. 20, right? He's strong. One guy comes to the draft and then another man says what? No, that's what? And it's a reality. That's not the same as people knowing that Tyrone and Tamika was together all of those years, even though they were never what? You understand the difference? It's a huge difference between the two. Wallahu a'lam.
On an inheritance, you have more than one wife. One wife you've been with 20 years, another wife you've been with 10 years. So you have accumulated more property.
Understood. Inheritance and polygamy or polygyny is based off of what's mentioned in the Quran. If she's your wife, if she has children from you, this is how much she deserves. How long you've been with one? Who knows this? How long? How much? None of that is on the table of discussion. And the same applies to children. Who's a better child? Who's a more righteous son? Who looks more like you? Who's obedient? It's your son from legal marriage. That's his portion. Wahakada. As far as property together, then obviously that's a different story. It's not all your property. If it's shared with one wife that you've been with for 20 years and another wife you've only been with for 10 years. Inshallah, this will be our last question. Bismillah. طيب. تفضل. أيوة. طيب بارك الله فيك. The book of Imam Ibn Hibban, Abu Hatim, Muhammad ibn Hibban al-Busti, who died in the year 354. Great Persian muhaddith. He wrote a book which is called At-Taqasim wal-Anwa'. It's the proper name or title of his book. And his book is not considered from the Sunan genre, rather it's from the genre of Sihah. In other words, Ibn Hibban's book, the style, the genre is like Bukhari. It's like Muslim, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn as-Sakin. There are other scholars who wrote Sahihs. Bukhari's book became the king of them all, the top book. But there are other scholars who wrote books in that what? In that genre. Bukhari is not the only one, nor is Muslim. So Ibn Hibban, rahimahullah, in the 4th century, he wrote a book based off of hadiths that he himself considered to be totally genuine. And it's important to understand that as such. Bukhari wrote a book. We have to stick with facts now, not emotions. Bukhari, Muslim, etc. These scholars, they wrote books that they themselves considered to be what? Totally genuine. Another scholar, etc. But they themselves, that was their stipulation. Right? So Ibn Hibban, rahimahullah ta'ala, he made a stipulation that that was going to be a book of authentic narrations, but the way that he organized and arranged the book was very different. It was innovative. Lam yusbaq ilay. No, he put his book. And that was, he didn't base it off of chapter heading, nor did he base it off of Musnad, the names of the Sahaba, but he based it off of command, prohibition, ghaib, virtue, vice. Taqasim wal anwa. So all the hadiths pertaining to the Prophet warning, he put in one place. Hadiths pertaining to the Prophet encouraging, he put wahakadha, right? The different types of hadiths, the genres of hadith within one book. So this is one of the reasons why Ibn Hibban's book did not become as popular and accepted. Let alone the fact that he was of the 4th century, not the 3rd. Let alone the fact that his book was actually lost. The full version of his book is lost. Was it stolen by the Crusaders, burnt by the Mongols, taken by the Shia, destroyed when the Sunnis fought each other, burnt down, and whatever? It was lost. And only a small piece of the original book is found to this day. But Allah Azza wa Jalla, through His mercy and wisdom, He allowed it to survive. And that was another scholar came after Ibn Hibban, and he put Ibn Hibban's book in order. Tartib. Rattabahu. So whenever you read hadith Akhraj ibn Hibban, Rawah ibn Hibban, in other words, just Akhraj ibn Hibban, kama fil ihsan. Unless it's a scholar who was alive when the actual book was around. And obviously, inshallah ta'ala, if you want to learn more about Ibn Hibban in his book, I would advise you to go back to our series that we have done on the compilation of the Sunnah, Tadween al-Sunnah. And the history of the hadith compilation, we've done it more than once. You can find it on the channel. And we spoke on Ibn Hibban's book. These types of questions, which are not the general questions, but specifically guided questions for people who want to know more about the hadith culture and not just the general household name stuff. And Ibn Hibban's book, no doubt about it, is very important. Kitab muhim wa azim. And Ibn Hibban, rahimahullah ta'ala, the last thing I'll say is that he was from the fuqaha al-muhaddithin. He's a descendant of Bukhari, even not through blood. He's from those ulama who took fiqh and put the fiqh inside of the hadith bottle, instead of it being separate or it being mixed and merged. There's a difference. Fiqh, 100%, no hadith. Hadith, 100%, no fiqh. Hadith and fiqh being mixed versus this is hadith, but inside of it I'm pouring fiqh. But it's not 100%, it's 3/4, whatever hadith, in the hadith bottle, in the hadith shape. And that was the way of Bukhari, Tirmidhi, those ulama who are fuqaha, but at the same time their pedigree was what? Ahlul hadith, haddathana, akhbarana. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Khair, inshallah, we'll stop here, guys. Sorry if we didn't get to any other questions and we didn't take anything from online. I don't know exactly how you want to do this or exactly, but I'm open or down, bismillah, for whatever, inshallah, with regards to our brother, inshallah.